Arab Islamic countries condemn Netanyahu's Greater Israel remark. EU leaders double down on support for Ukraine. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. Thanks for joining us. I'm Otto Othman and you're watching World Today. A coalition of Arab and Muslim nations has condemned in the strongest terms statements made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu regarding his vision for a Greater Israel. The Greater Israel concept, supported by ultra-nationalist Israelis, is understood to refer to an expansionist vision that lays claim to the occupied West Bank, Gaza, parts of Lebanon, Syria, Egypt and Jordan. In a joint statement by a coalition of 31 Arab and Islamic countries and the Arab League, said Netanyahu's statements represent a grave disregard for and a blatant and dangerous violation of the rules of international law and the foundations of a stable international relations. They also constitute a direct threat to Arab national security, the sovereignty of states, and to regional and international peace and security. The Arab and Islamic nations also condemned Israel Finance Minister announcement to push ahead with settlement expansion in the occupied West Bank. The coalition said the move is a flagrant assault on the inalienable right of the Palestinian people to realize their independent, sovereign state on the lines of the June 4, 1967, with occupied Jerusalem as its capital. The coalition added that Israel has no sovereignty over occupied Palestinian territory. Medical charity Doctors Without Borders (MSF) stated that the number of injured Palestinians by Israeli fire in Gaza has tripled since late May, as the territory's shattered health system struggles to cope. MSF's deputy medical coordinator in Gaza said that food distribution centers set up under an Israeli and U.S.-backed body known as the Gaza Relief Organization have turned into areas of death rather than safe points for civilians. According to Gaza's health ministry, nearly 1,924 people have been killed and more than 14,000 injured while waiting for aid at such sites since 27th May, when the Israeli-run scheme began. Now, since the crushed bones, scenes of crushed bones and amputated limbs, torn arteries and severe infections stress that emergency surgery and intensive care, both already decimated by months of war, are collapsing and the few hospitals still functioning. He called for an immediate ceasefire and unfettered humanitarian access, saying without them, there will be nothing left to save, neither hospitals nor patients, nor the future. Meanwhile, the U.S. government has announced the suspension of visitor visas for individuals from Gaza. This decision follows complaints from a far-right influencer who has the attention of President Donald Trump regarding the allowance of injured Palestinians to receive medical care in the United States. The State Department said all visitor visas for individuals from Gaza are being stopped while conduct a full and thorough review of the process and procedures used to issue a small number of temporary medical humanitarian visas in recent days. In a series of posts on X, Laura Loomer, who is known for promoting racist conspiracy theories, called on the State Department to stop giving visas to Palestinians from Gaza who she said were pro-Hamas, affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood and funded by Qatar, without provoking evidence. Israel's military in Gaza since October 2023 has killed nearly 61,900 Palestinians, devastated the enclave, and pushed it to the brink of famine. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Russia will like an early cessation of hostilities in Ukraine by peaceful means. Putin said at a meeting on the results of his talks with U.S. President Donald Trump that Russia respects the position of the U.S. administration. Putin stated his visit to the U.S. state of Alaska was timely and quite useful, adding that the talks covered almost all aspects of his interactions with Trump, with a focus on achieving a fair resolution of the Ukraine crisis. He discussed with Trump the origins and causes of the Ukraine crisis, emphasizing it is the removal of these root causes that must be underlined the settlement. Now, he said the conversation with Trump was very frank and moves closer towards making necessary decisions. Recently, Putin and Trump wrapped up their talks in the U.S. in Alaska, but no deal was reached. Now, the talks, which lasted about 3 hours, focused primarily on the Ukraine crisis, as well as on reshaping bilateral relations that have largely stalled in recent years. Top European leaders stressed that Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity must be fully respected following U.S. President Donald Trump's meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska. The leaders urged further negotiations involving Zelensky, whom Trump is expected to meet soon. In a statement, the leaders underlined that Ukraine must receive ironclad security guarantees to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. They welcomed Trump's declaration that Washington was prepared to provide such guarantees, expressing readiness to work with Trump and Zelensky toward a trilateral summit with European support. They added no limitations should be placed on Ukraine's armed forces or on its cooperation with third countries. Russia cannot have veto against Ukraine's pathway to the EU and NATO. Reaffirming their support for Kyiv, the leaders stressed that Ukraine alone must decide on its territory and that international borders must not be changed by force. As long as fighting continues, the leaders said Europe will maintain pressure on Russia through strengthened sanctions and broader economic measures targeting its war economy. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky will travel to Washington on Monday for talks with U.S. President Donald Trump. Zelensky announced on Telegram following a phone call with Trump. He intended to discuss all the details about the end of the killings and the end of the war with President Trump in Washington. He supports Trump's proposal for a trilateral meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He added, Ukraine emphasizes that key issues can be discussed at the leadership level and that a trilateral format is appropriate for this. Zelensky said he had a long and substantive conversation with Trump, which began as a one-on-one talk before being joined by European leaders. Trump informed Zelensky and the European leaders about the main discussion points with Putin. U.S. President Donald Trump's wife, Melania Trump, raised the plight of children in Ukraine and Russia in a personal letter to Russian President Vladimir Putin. President Trump delivered the letter to Putin during their summit talks in Alaska. U.S. Attorney General shared a copy of the letter written by the First Lady in a post on the social media platform. In the letter, the First Lady addressed the need to nurture and protect children. Russia's seizure of Ukrainian children has been a deeply sensitive one for Ukraine. Ukraine has called the abductions of tens of thousands of its children taken to Russia or Russian-occupied territory without consent of family or guardians, a war crime that meets the UN treaty definition of genocide. Ukrainian president conveyed his gratitude to the First Lady on his call with Trump. Previously, Moscow has said it has been protecting vulnerable children from a war zone. The Canadian government took steps to resolve a strike involving Air Canada cabin crew by requesting a Labour board to mandate binding arbitration. Now, this was something the country's biggest airline wanted, but the striking flight attendants were against it. Now, thousands of Air Canada unionized flight attendants walked off the job over a wage contract dispute. They also forcing Air Canada to cancel all of its 700 daily flights, affecting more than 100,000 travelers who had to find alternative flights or stay put. Job Minister Patty Hajdu said that she had asked the Canada Industrial Relations Board to impose binding arbitration on both sides and order an immediate end to the strike.
As Minister of Labour, I have exercised my authorities under Section 107 of the Canadian Labour Code to direct the Canada Industrial Relations Board to order the parties to resume and continue their operations and duties in order to secure industrial peace and protect the interests of Canada, Canadians, and the economy.
She added Air Canada had indicated it would take 4 to 5 days to resume full operations, assuming the board granted the government's request, which it usually does. The carrier had offered a 38% increase in total compensation for flight attendants over 4 years, with a 25% raise in the first year, which the Canadian Union of Public Employees said was insufficient. Attendants are currently paid only when their plane is moving. Next, blast at factory in Russia's Ryazan kills 11, injures 130.
Tahukah anda berapa banyak air kita gunakan dalam sehari? Dalam sehari, kita gunakan air lebih banyak berbanding negara-negara di Asia Tenggara. Mandi, memasak dan membasuh merupakan penyumbang terbesar kepada penggunaan air. Kelestarian sumber air bermula dari kita. Gunakan produk cekap air. Kelangsungan bekalan air generasi akan datang bermula dengan kita.
A family of 6 died when flash floods triggered by a sudden cloud burst ravaged the remote village of Sasha. The overnight deluge in the Laria area destroyed at least 6 homes and swept away about 50 livestock. The deadly floods in Sasha came amid widespread monsoon devastation across South Asia. The northwest Pakistan alone, more than 300 people have been killed after 2 days of torrential rains, triggered flash floods, landslides and lightning strikes. The hardest hit area was the mountainous northern region, where cloudbursts and raging floodwaters marked the deadliest downpour of this year's monsoon season. The Provincial Disaster Management Authority confirmed at least 307 fatalities, with many more still missing. Parts of neighboring India and Nepal have also been hit hard by heavy rains, flooding and other rain-related incidents over the past week. Now, torrential rain sparked intense floods and damaged hundreds of homes in the northeast in Nigerian town of Potiskum. Now, weather authorities in the West African nation had warned just last week that parts of 21 of the country's 36 states were under a flood warning due to seasonal rains. The Obey State Emergency Management Agency SEMA said more than 200 houses were damaged, while locals estimated 500 houses were severely hit following overnight rains. No deaths were reported. Muhammad Goji, Executive Secretary of the Yobe SEMA, said that response teams were currently in the field and that, according to a preliminary estimate, some 600 people were likely affected. It was reported that blocked drainage systems were also exacerbating the flooding. Heavy rains generally sweep through Nigeria between June and November after triggering dangerous floods where poor infrastructure and inadequate drainage often worsen the impact across Africa's most populous country. Hundreds were killed earlier this year after a flood ripped through the north-central town of Mokwa in Niger State. Now, scientists have also warned that climate change is fueling more extreme weather patterns. Hurricane Erin, the first hurricane of the 2025 Atlantic season, has become a catastrophic Category 5 hurricane. The U.S. National Hurricane Center, NHC, said the storm is currently 105 miles north of Anguilla, with maximum sustained winds near 160 miles per hour. Now, the NHC said that Erin is expected to strengthen over the southwestern Atlantic through the weekend and into next week. Swells generated by Erin will affect portions of the northern Leeward Islands and Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico and Caicos Islands through the weekend. The swells will spread to the Bahamas, Bermuda and the east coast of the United States early next week. Erin has also raised concerns about another unforeseen risk: wildfires. Erin is expected to produce areas of heavy rainfall through Sunday across northern Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. A blast at a factory in the Russian region of Ryazan killed 11 people and left 130 injured. In a statement, Russia's emergencies ministry said on Saturday that rescuers were continuing to search through rubble at the scene of the blast 320 kilometers southeast of Moscow. The footage showed injured people being carried on stretchers into ambulances as emergency crews removed pieces of rubble. Ryazan region Governor Pavel Molkov said that the incident had been triggered by a fire breaking out inside a workshop at the factory. There was no cause given for the fire, nor was it clear what the factory produced. Ukrainian drones have previously targeted military and economic infrastructure in Ryazan region. Some Russian media outlets reported that the explosion was caused by gunpowder catching fire. A blast had previously occurred in the same factory back in 2021, which had killed 17 people at the time. Working in factories in Russia is considered quite dangerous, and fatal accidents involving workers are not uncommon in the country. The blast comes amid Russia's war in Ukraine that has been racing for more than 3 years. Anti-government protests in Serbia escalated, with police using tear gas and ground control vehicles to disperse demonstrators in Belgrade. Now, the unrest spread to several other towns following allegations of police brutality during recent demonstrations. Now, this including reports of a 25-year-old man seriously injured after being beaten by police. Children aged 15 and 17 were among those arrested and beaten during a protest organized by the high school students. Serbia's Interior Ministry has denied the allegations of police brutality. The Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights has expressed concern about the ongoing events in Serbia, noting the pressing human rights issues. Now, months of protests across Serbia sparked by deaths of 16 people when a roof on a renovated railway station in Novi Sad collapsed. Protests have been mainly peaceful until Wednesday evening, when 27 police officers and around 80 civilians were injured in clashes and 47 people had been detained. Bolivia is set to hold its general election later today, with just over 7.9 million Bolivians eligible to cast ballots in what could mark a significant shift in the country's actually political landscape after nearly 2 decades of leftist rule. Final preparations were underway as election officials across the country secured voting materials and polling stations. In Villa Tunari, El Chapere, soldiers stood guard as electoral officials unloaded ballot boxes and election materials from buses. An economic crisis and a divided left have opened the door to a possible right-wing victory for the first time in decades. The country's deep economic crisis is top of mind for voters amidst inflation and fuel shortages. Now, the election comes amid unprecedented political fragmentation. Now, President Luis Arce has opted not to run for re-election, and a constitutional court ruling in May barred former President Evo Morales from participating. Morales, who dominated Bolivian politics for over a decade, has called for supporters to boycott the election by casting null votes.
Guna mentol jimat tenaga untuk lebih jimat.
Coming up in sports, Sinner ends Atman's dream run to reach Cincinnati final. Ducati's Marc Marquez conquered his Austrian Grand Prix jinx in style by charging from fourth on the grid to claim victory in Saturday's sprint race at the Red Bull Ring, with his brother and closest championship contender Alex finishing second. The Ducati rider executed a flawless performance to secure his first ever race win in Austria, extending his remarkable sprint dominance with a 12th victory in 13 rounds this season. The victory moves Marc Marquez 123 points clear of Gresini Racing's Alex Marquez at the top of the championship and 180 above Ducati teammate Francesco Bagnaia, who was forced to retire due to problems with his bike. KTM's Pedro Acosta completed an all-Spanish podium by finishing third at his team's home circuit, while Aprilia's Marco Bezzecchi, who had claimed pole position, could only manage fourth place in the sprint. Bezzecchi had claimed his first pole with Aprilia earlier on Saturday, but was beaten to turn one by Alex and Marc as the Marquez brothers dropped the Italian down to third, while the wheel spin for Bagnaia dropped him 11 places to 14th. Kingsley Coman has left Bayern Munich to join Saudi Pro League side Al Nassr. The French international, who joined Bayern on a 2-year loan from Juventus in 2015 before agreeing a permanent deal with the German side in 2017, will now link up with Cristiano Ronaldo, as well as fellow summer signings Inigo Martinez and Joao Felix at Al Nassr. Al Nassr is looking to improve after finishing third in the Saudi Pro League last season and signed Ronaldo to a 2-year contract extension in June. Coman scored 72 goals in 339 matches for Bayern, including the winning goal in the 2020 Champions League final against Paris Saint-Germain. Coman won 9 Bundesliga titles, the Champions League and Club World Cup at Bayern. Now, Coman's departure from Bayern comes 2 weeks after the German champions signed Luis Diaz from Liverpool, intensifying Coman's competition for places. He got a fond farewell from Bayern coach Vincent Kompany after they won the Bundesliga together last season. Top seed and defending champion Yannick Sinner, playing on his 24th birthday, ended French qualifier Terence Atman's dream run at the Cincinnati Open with a 7-6, 6-2 win on Saturday to reach the final of the US Open tune-up event. Sinner won a remarkable 91% of his first serve points, did not face a single break point during the 86-minute match, and converted 2 of 5 break points in his first career meeting with world number 136 Atman. The Italian world number 1 had his hands full throughout a tightly contested first set, which featured an imperious serving display from both men and not a single breakpoint opportunity for either player. Sinner, who lost just 3 points on serve in the opening set, held to love for a third consecutive game to force the tiebreak, where Atman gifted his opponent the opening point with a double fault, and from there, the Italian never looked back. The reigning US Open, Australian Open and Wimbledon champion opened the second set with a 9-minute hold of serve, then held to love before finally breaking Atman for a 3-1 lead that gave him the cushion he needed. Sinner followed with another hold to love to go for 1-up and all but end any hope of Atman, who beat top 10 players Taylor Fritz and Holger Rune en route to his maiden ATP Masters 1000 semi-final. Up next, the biggest Pokemon event in the world arrives in Anaheim. From felted plush toys displayed like taxidermy specimens to a tower of misshapen cat pillows, a new exhibition in Hangzhou is celebrating some of the weird and quirky products available for online sale in China. The Era of Uglies has arrived exhibition, organized for the first time this year by Alibaba-owned e-commerce giant Taobao. spotlights over 300 products that have won or been shortlisted at the platform's annual Ugly Stuff competition, also known as the Uglies Award. For some visitors, the exhibition was a reflection on the meaning of beauty, while others saw it as a lesson in creative thinking.
观看的人数已经远远超过了我们的期待。对，它其实是变成了就是整个夏天在杭州一个非常知名的一个打卡地。那不仅是有杭州居民，就本来就在杭州的居民会来参观，还有很多用户他是在线上看到了淘宝丑东西各种各样的人的打卡，从全国各地来这里来观展。那现在我们开展一周每一天的日均观展人流量超过了3000人，截止目前应该是有几万人都参观过了这个展览。
The gifts may look like a joke, but the sales are serious business. Now, according to Alibaba, ugly products on Taobao have generated over 100 million yuan, or $13.94 million in sales since 2020, with you estimating current growth rates for the sector in the double or triple digits. The best Pokemon players in the world are taking part in the 2025 World Championships. It's the biggest and most important Pokemon tournament around, attracting some of the very best trainers to compete. Now, thousands of Pokemon fans from all over the globe have gathered for the event, which takes place from 15th to 17th August in Anaheim in California in the US. This is the third time the championships have taken place in Anaheim. With a total prize of pool of $2 million and the title of world champion up for grabs, there's a lot at stake. Players taking part in the tournament can compete in 4 different categories, namely trading card game, video game competition, Pokemon Go, and Pokemon Unite. Trading card game is playing with Pokemon cards, and video game competition is played using the Scarlet and Violet game on the Nintendo Switch console. Pokemon Go is played on mobile phones, and Pokemon Unite is played on mobile or Switch consoles. To be invited to compete in the World Championships, players must have earned enough championship points, which are gained by competing in local competitions around the world throughout the year. On a football-style pitch in China's Beijing, a whistle blows and 2 teams of participants rush towards the ball, ready to showcase their soccer skills as robots. China kicked off the 3-day-long World Humanoid Robot Games on Friday, looking to showcase its advances in artificial intelligence and robotics with 280 teams and 16 countries. Robots compete in sports such as boxing, football, and track and field, as well as tackled robot-specific challenges from sorting medicines and handling materials to cleaning services. Teams came from countries including the United States, Germany, and Brazil, with 192 representing universities and 88 from private university or enterprises such as China's Unitree and Fourier Intelligence. Now that concludes today's edition of World Today. In our top story, Arab Islamic countries condemn Netanyahu's Greater Israel remark. Now with that, I'm Otto Othman, Malaysia Madani, Rakyat Disantuni. Thanks for watching.